Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Audit Committee. Welcome to Debbie and Alison on the...
Oh, it's Amanda.
And Amanda, sorry, Amanda, on the dialing in. We all know each other, I think, so we won't do introductions today. We'll go straight into declarations of interest.
So thank you. I'd like to declare that my role at NSFT Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust has slightly changed. I'm now the deputy change. I don't believe that causes any conflict of interest with this meeting being ahead.
Thank you. Any other changes? Excellent, thank you. Right, slight change to the agenda. Debbie needs to be away as soon as possible, so we'll take item 5 in lieu of item 2, the update on external audit on 24-25. Debbie, welcome, over to you.
I can chat, and thank you very much for accommodating what's a very last minute request for a change, so I appreciate that very much. So in terms of an update, we've made good progress on the work, but as I discussed with Colette earlier this week, we have had some staffing issues internally within EY due to sickness, which we've therefore had to look to sort of backfill the gaps that has resulted in. We have kept the finance team aware of that throughout, so it means we are slightly behind where we would like to be, but we are still we'll still be able to meet the backstop date at the end of February, so there's no risk around that. It's just we're a little bit further behind on some of the areas of the audit compared to where we were wanting to be at this particular stage. The main areas of work we haven't yet started is the new leases standard, IFRS 16, also work on the capital financing requirements and minimum revenue provision, and then our work on journals, and we're looking to be completing that work during November and December. Other areas of work that are in progress at the moment are PPE, where we're doing a little bit more work this year because of the change in valuer. We have recently got responses back from the valuer in relation to some of our questions, and the team is now starting to work through those. We're also undertaking our normal procedures on pensions, and that work is due back by the end of October from our pensions team. We need to update our work on on provisions in relation to the data breach. Again, we've been kept up to date on the progress on that, but obviously until we get the final ICO report, we're not able to fully conclude that work, both in terms of the impact on the financial statements and any disclosures that are needed within there, and also if there are any issues noted in that we need to consider from a value for money perspective. Our work on income and payroll is in review, and we'll update our going concern procedures towards the end of the audit, but there's no risk in relation to going concern, as you're obviously aware. Really positive to report there's really no issues arising from the audit so far. So we've been well supported by the finance team. So again, just want to stress that the reason we're not where we wanted to be is completely down to our resourcing issues and not due to any sort of delays from the part of the finance team. In relation to value for money, again, that work is well progressed. We are required to report a draft value for money report by the end of November. That needs to go to chief finance officers, needs to go to the PCC and the CC as those charged with governance, but we're also happy to send that to the audit committee members as well. What we would do is then update that auditor's annual report when we're actually in a position to issue the opinion and issue that as a final at that point. We would not expect any changes to the value for money commentary, including that, unless something really significant occurred between the end of November and when we issue our opinion. Probably not a lot else to say in relation to that. I guess just did discuss earlier in the week kind of what the format of the opinion might be in 24-25. Obviously 23-24 was a disclaimed opinion because of the fact that we didn't do any work in 22-23 due to the backstop arrangements. There is a possibility we may be able to move to a qualified rather than a disclaimed opinion for 24-25. We were able to complete pretty much all of our procedures that we planned to do in 23-24. And assuming we can complete our planned work in 24-25, that may enable us to move to that qualified opinion, which is obviously a step on the move to kind of the final position of unqualified in a couple of years' time. I can't confirm that at the moment because we haven't had the example audit reports that we need to go through the process of reviewing what assurances we have and see where that puts us in terms of what form of opinion we use. If there's too many kind of gaps in assurance that we need to report, in our opinion, that can actually become more confusing for a reader if we try to kind of detail that, in which case we would probably move to a disclaimed wording. But we will discuss that with Colette and Kenneth at the point that we're able to conclude and work through that process. So very happy to take any questions or comments on where we are at the moment.
That looks like no questions, so thanks, Debbie.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you again for accommodating me having to move the timing, so really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
On to the actions of the audit committee meeting held on 5th of July arising. So with regard to the minutes, as usual, I'll flip the pages. If anyone has anything to comment, amend, query, please do so as we go through. The easiest page, hopefully first, page 1, page 2, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, page 9 is my summary actions.
Yeah, just a typo, I think. On 7.1, first sentence ends 2005. Sorry, the date of this. The mayoral election.
Yeah. Thank you. It's fine. Yes.
I don't know if it's going to come up, but just we're doing devolution later. I don't know if you want to take it now. Later on.
We've got it on the agenda
Later.
Yeah, so we'll take it then.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. So subject to that one amendment, are we happy that the minutes are referring to the last meeting? So, thank you. So picking up then the summary of actions arising from the July meeting, bottom of page 9. Claire, I think it's a fairly clear run for you for most of them. Do you want to take them in sequence?
Perfect, yes. So 3.4, I believe we have done in terms of in the SICR, so obviously that's covered in the SICR report that we provided to you today. 3.8, the figures I will get circulated to members in terms of obviously the data we've requested, so that will be circulated to members. We've got to...
Claire, on 3.8, I probably should have raised it earlier when we were flipping the pages. It's a terminology question that's more for minutes than here. You say in droves. Are we happy that that is correct? Bearing in mind that this is a publicly disclosed document. Does suggest there's a biblical exodus. And I just wonder whether perhaps a different phrase could be found.
Yes, I guess a better word would have been an improvement, I guess, but I guess it's just asking the question. But if it jumps out, yes, it might be better to amend.
So, Kate, perhaps we could find just a slightly less emotive phrase there, please. So I should have raised it earlier.
Hopefully we've already had it start with it, correct?
Indeed.
And 3.9, we've added a timescale, so we've been agreed the 31st of March 2026 will be the timescale that they're working towards. So what we are going to do is we'll recirculate a final draft, a revised final to reflect the changes that have been made to this report. And then 3.10, obviously we have amended that, that's covered. And 3.13, we have obviously amended slightly the format of the scope of the front sheet of the report. So when we get to SIC, is it right to get people's thoughts on that? And if that's giving you sufficient information when we get to that part of the our agenda item, if that's okay. And then I think that is all of my items, because obviously 3.1 was sort of assigned to me, but I think Kenneth was going to speak to him as well. But obviously we have followed that up as part of our follow-up as well. So I don't know if you want me to take that, Kenneth, for yourself, wants to give an update.
I think it's probably should have been assigned to me. Yeah, I've spoken to Steve Parents. He's reached out to other budget holders of the public checklist and they have conversations with suppliers around it's got to use.
Back to you for 4.2.
Perfect. So that has been amended, but obviously the internal audit annual report wasn't on the agenda. So what I will do is I'll circulate that. I'll pass that on to get recirculated to members with the updates.
5.2, Kate, you covered.
Oh, yeah, I updated the amends to the report and the new versions on the website.
Thank you. Tim, 6.4, the
Yeah,
individual.
so Colette, I'll let Colette go into the detail. We had a discussion on that, so I'll pass, no, I'm not passing it on.
I would say at this point, you know, discussions are ongoing about what the appropriate levels and increase are. I've been picking that up with the head of our treasury management function and our treasury management advisors, and there will be an increase in our treasury management strategy for next year, but we haven't yet in the decision, which is basically that is interim.
My own personal view is that I think we've got to be careful not to put all our eggs in one basket. I've always said that. Like in my experience when I was at Mid Suffolk, I think I mentioned it last time. Many years ago, when there was huge enthusiasm for investing, goodness knows what, like the Icelandic bank, we don't. My view has always been we don't play fast and loose with other people's money. And whilst it might be boring, nevertheless, the guaranteed return I think is really, really important. We don't take undue risks and so on. So that's the emphasis, but obviously we'll complete that when we get some other advice. And of course, your views as a committee will be very welcome.
Thank you. Devolution runs up further on the agenda and item was item 6. So on to the summary of internal controls plan.
So we are presenting our standard progress report to yourselves today. Before I sort of get into the update, I just want to sort of highlight I have made a typo on table 5. The communication strategy is actually substantial assurance, and we did have the exit meeting yesterday with the key leads from representatives from Suffolk and Norfolk Constabulary, and then also the Suffolk PCC and the Norfolk PCC were all all represented in that meeting yesterday. So we anticipate management comments coming in the next couple of days. So that will be a final, obviously, for the next audit committee meeting. Just for timing, unfortunately, just didn't make the papers for this committee. So in your pack today, you have got 5 finalised reports: complaints, safeguarding, the ICT review of ICT strategy and projects, performance management and corporate governance. You'll notice there's a slightly different style with some of the reports, because some of them were drafted as part of the 24-25 plan, and obviously some newer ones like the corporate governance and performance management are the 25-26 style that we're taking forward. So that's why there's a slight difference, but we didn't make changes to executive summaries because we will get draft when we're looking to discuss the changes. So in the report, you have got the final report on the complaints is the first report that's been presented to yourselves today. We have raised 1 priority 2 recommendation and 2 priority 2 recommendations. Overall, we were satisfied with the complaints function as a whole, but we have obviously made those recommendations just to improve the controls that are operating currently. And the priority 2 recommendation sort of reflected on the need to ensure there's a proper escalation process to ensure that complaints are responded to timely. So we have got a very detailed response from the owner there in terms of how they're going to take that forward. And I will just pause there and take questions about the complaints, if that's okay.
Right. Just to follow up on that, one comment just on page 3, I just also thought it was worth noting. I still think it should be said because we spoke about it at the beginning of this cycle, but I think the improvement in timescales for getting reports in and through the system, I think that should be commended because by and large, there's been a massive improvement in those timescales. And obviously, I mean, where they are a bit extended, it's maybe a slightly more specific report that maybe needed a bit more consideration, but I think that should be, that improvement should be noted. And I think on the complaints, you've, Claire, you've touched on it. I just wanted to say, I thought that the response and the comprehensiveness of that response of taking the complaint seriously was, again, from the complaints manager, should be noted as being incredibly comprehensive. And I wanted to ask one quick question, just so that I'm clear in my mind. On the complaints, it's covered all complaints, internal, external, anything that's was viewed. And the comprehensiveness of the response, does that reflect from the sample that complaints have increased in recent years or stayed roughly the same? There's possibly more questions to the management team, but is that why this approach has changed? Is that we've seen an increase in the number of complaints or the severity of them, or?
I think we have had increased reporting for complaints, both internally and externally, and we've always kind of had a bit of a shortage in resourcing across the complaints management unit and PSD generally, which we need to address through our budget settlement processes this year to next. Yeah, that's the reason there. I don't think there's anything terribly endemic that sits behind it, other than there's a greater frequency of reporting, because there is a greater awareness being put out by OPCC constabulary around, if you have been fairly treated, you wish to make a complaint, this is how you do it. So it's a bit difficult to tell in terms of, is there an underlying increase versus previous years numbers, because actually it could just be that complaints are the same, but just won't be reported any.
Hugh, I just add a comment. I entirely agree with what Kenneth has said. Extra resources are going in, and I think there has been a slight increase, but I think we need to bear in mind, obviously there are many more police officers than there were 2 or 3 years ago. But just to reassure everybody, and if this is a public message, we do look at this at our accountability and performance panel every year and in depth. So we monitor it carefully. We do work together to do that. But yeah, extra resources going into it will help. So it's definitely is a focus on it.
I was just going to say, I think you're very much in line with other forces. They are seeing a slight increase, but it's reflective of us plenty of the nature of the environment we're in. But I would say you're an outlier. But no, I think it's a really, and the complaints manager was really actually, I probably shouldn't say this, but really was grateful for the review. Really was added a lot of value to him as well, which is really nice to work with someone who really took that on board as well.
I just have a further question. When you put in here that the implementation timetable is December 2025, which is fine, is that for everything to have been put in place by the end of December? Just so
So what they're going to be held accountable to. So let's move on to the next report then, is that okay? So obviously, so the next report we presented ourselves is on the safeguarding, and obviously we've asked it to focus on the cadet programme because it's not an area we have audited within the last 9 years. So it was something they wanted to focus on, especially the vulnerability of working with children. I just wanted to highlight, obviously, before we sort of go through any specific questions on the cadet programme, there's been a change in the way that the team has been operating. So there was a slight delay receiving the comments because they've got a new children's and young persons manager. So they want to be able to take ownership for these recommendations going forward. So that contributed to delay and obviously in receiving the comments and formally sign this off. But yeah, I said, I think overall it was working satisfactory. We did identify some issues in terms of the renewal process for DBS because there was not a centralised process to ensure they were done. Now having that function internally with a centralised manager should reduce the risk of DBS's renewals not being repeated, and obviously for safeguarding training, a couple had fallen through, the refresher hadn't been undertaken. But yeah, I will pause there and take any questions about the cadet programme safeguarding audit.
Yeah, just a very quick one more for interest and anything else. When it talks there at the bottom page 2 of this one, the safeguarding training, how involved is that? And the only reason I ask is I have to do DBS checks online, rugby refereeing, etc. But the safeguarding training, is that just sort of a refresher? Or because one of my concerns is not that it isn't important, because it obviously is, but if you make it too onerous or there's too much, then that does put certain people off volunteering. So trying to get that happy balance is quite a challenge.
I think the answer to this question is comprehensive. I think it covered the required areas we didn't raise. We felt sufficient for the level that people were doing. So that didn't seem to be deterrent. I think the level of training was sufficient to give you assurance that people understood their safeguarding responsibility. So I think it was set at a fair level. We didn't need to raise any recommendations on the quality of what was being provided.
Thank you.
Safeguarding. Claire, back to you.
Perfect. And then the third report is obviously the ICT strategy. Obviously, we have raised a couple of recommendations here. Obviously, and it'll be interesting when we do the change management audit to see if that's fully embedded, because that'll be one area we'll sort of be able to overlap on that side as well. So we just wanted to make sure, obviously that projects were fully aligned to make sure we can see those changes coming forward. And we also have just raised a priority 3 recommendation there in terms of making sure in terms of reference are appropriate. So I will pause and take any questions about the ICT review.
As part of the review on this, as part of the scope, did you have a look at how it links between the ICT projects and actually the wider strategy for policing and wider transformation programs?
I believe it did. Obviously, this was done by our ICT teams, Lynn, so I won't have to take that detailed question away. What we are doing as part of the PMO, we'll do the change management audit, that will be fully, that will be covered. But I will have to take that question back and feedback to yourselves if that's okay. That particular question you raised.
Yes, thank you. Things like this, at times they can be slightly standalone.
Yeah.
And it's good to ensure that they do dovetail.
Exactly, to support each other.
With wider transformation programs.
And in terms of the individual local boards across the ICT landscape, how are they all brought together in terms of a holistic oversight?
I'll have to take that on the way. Apologies, Chair, because I didn't actually do the detail. I did do the review and it's done, obviously reviewed by our ICT colleagues as well. So we just didn't have different teams that review that as well. So
Be useful to know.
I will take that one. I'll take that as a note to take forward as well.
Thank you. Anything else?
Well, could I just follow up on that here? I think that's a very good point, because we're looking at improving efficiency and effectiveness. It's very important that the links are established so there's no duplication, but obviously things are done well. I suppose the follow-up there, terms of reference, etc., will be done. How would that be then, I suppose, assessed as to how effective they are? Is that something you'll be following up? Or?
Yeah, it will be obviously. We will be reviewing obviously the terms of reference to ensure they're fully aligned in picking up the key areas. There's no duplication in terms of where papers are going, because I think that's one of often we do our wider clients be that the same report goes to 3 different committees and it's basically got the same memberships. We've got a lot of duplication, but we'll follow them up as part of the follow-up of that recommendation.
And would that then get reported?
It will get reported back to yourselves.
Thank you.
So if I move on to the next report is on the performance management audit, and it's absolutely thrilling to be able to report a green audit. This is basically unheard of. So I think the performance management team do deserve to be congratulated. And as I said, against your peers, you do have a really good performance team. It's internal. They're able to then accommodate requests, make the necessary changes to any sort of data that's needed as well. So we have obviously included, obviously the full scope was covered on this executive summary, but I was excited it made it quite small because there's a lot on one page, but I hope it's user friendly and you're able to read that appropriately for yourselves as well. But yeah, as I said, overall, so there was really, really, really good work being done by yourselves. And I'll just pause and take any questions about that report.
Thank you.
So yes, it is really good news, and the teams should definitely be commended. Also reading the scope and the way that's now being reported, that was incredibly helpful. So it was a substantial assurance, and then when I saw actually what it covered, it raises even more the profile of that substantial assurance.
Yeah, I mean, really delved into, I was like, it can't be green. I was like, this can't be green, that green, but they really have done. And I think it's really nice that they do work well with different departments as well, that people get their service needs serviced appropriately as well. So yeah, it's a really, really well operated area of business. So it's definitely to be commended. Do you want to go into corporate governance structures?
Please do.
Perfect. So obviously the final report we presented to yourselves again, obviously it's in a slightly different format. So again, apologies, it's quite a lot obviously on the 2 pages as well. So we looked at corporate governance across the organisation. We have raised 4 routine recommendations and 3 operational effectiveness matters where we think they didn't impact the opinion, but something that we think needs to take forward to learn from as well. So we have raised 4 routine recommendations. One, as I said, they are there obviously to be discussed as well. Obviously, this was a collective response between both the Norfolk and the Suffolk Constabularies and obviously the OPC's office as well. So we've had all 4 obviously representatives feeding into this audit. I think I will probably pause there and take any questions because I'm anticipating number 4 might be an interesting recommendation to discuss as a committee, but I will also take any questions.
Just, it was on that point, but, I mean, first, I don't apologise for the length of the summary.
I'm just worried if there's too much on the web, we should put it across more than 1 page. Is that okay? I just feel like it's quite small. That's what I'm worried about.
I don't mind, to be honest. I don't want the other thing, but I don't mind. It gave me a proper flavour for.
I'm sorry about the font being quite small for people to like circle their eyes.
And why, and that I found that really useful. Yes, I mean the point is on floor, isn't it? And just to understand our role in terms of reporting through the engineers. Maybe one for management.
My understanding of this recommendation was more around kind of the audit committee's remits with regards to the effectiveness of risk management arrangements. And I think it's a conversation that we've kind of had as management committee obviously recently. And the current terms of reference, they consider the risk management arrangements, PCC and the Chief Constable. And we discussed at the July workshop about seeking that to consider the effectiveness of the risk management arrangements, PCC and the Chief Constable. So I think once we've updated kind of those terms of reference in terms of the audit committee's remit is to consider the effectiveness of the risk management arrangements, we will be able to kind of in our reporting within our annual governance statements that the audit committee have fulfilled their terms of reference. And obviously we've discussed what papers to bring to audit committee for you to be able to effectively fulfil that. I think my understanding of that recommendation is that they'll complete that action, and that's kind of how I was planning to take it forward.
I think that's fine, and that's the answer I was rather hoping for, because in a sense we're already on this, aren't we?
Exactly.
We've been on this for a while to improve the quality of what we're producing ultimately with the AGS. So yes, so there's continuing the work that we've already done.
Yeah.
And then that links into number 1, doesn't it, which is the terms of reference bit into the theme governance, which we've kind of scheduled in.
I think around this table, though, we need to have discussion and settle on what it is we want to see in order to discharge our responsibilities, our change of responsibilities under the draft TORs as they now stand.
Mm-hmm.
There is that discussion as to exactly what information is provided to us so that we get the assurance and not solely through the audit process, not on the third line, some of them are ongoing proactive basis. Without straying into risk management, how do we know that those people who are accountable for doing the risk management in the organisations, both the constabulary and the PCC, are actually doing what they should be doing, and the system of risk management is working effectively, efficiently.
I'm pleased to see this, and I just want to go back to the section they clear on page 6, looking at governance of the OPCC. Just to draw the committee's attention to the fact the complexity that can arise from certain forces, its procurement, vis-a-vis also the relationship with Blue Light Commercial. Of course, the 7 forces, you've got 14 corporation souls. I think there have been areas where there is room for improvement, I'll put it like that. Not because of deliberate obfuscation, but of the complexity. People need to understand that. Then with Blue Light Commercial, and then many of other external bodies, like, for example, NPAS, the National Police Air Service. That's another area. I represent the region, which is quite difficult because you've got 6 different views, and trying to put them all together is impossible. But again, there is a government structure there that we need to make sure that it's done in the right way. And of course, that is chief constables and OPCCs and so on. So that's yet another area to look at. And how do these national initiatives work with governments coming down to individual force areas, etc. I'm not saying there's any wrong, but I do think that's an area, if you can, just to have at least a cursory look at things like that, because we do need to make sure it's done in the right way. In impasse, for example, you see we're talking about millions of pounds of investment in new airframes, just as a thought.
To recommendation 4, we're not now due to meet until February next year, which feels a little way away. If at that meeting TMIs have been finalised and approved by PCC and Chief Constable, and I know Colette, we're looking at the possibility of a workshop in the afternoon for that meeting, if that fits with people's diaries. And so as a heads up, if you have that afternoon free, please keep it free. I think is an objective and getting some kind of timeline around this by the close of whatever meetings we have on 6th of February. I'd like to have a firm documented approach for the audit committee as regards how it ensures that this is being managed across both organisations. We've talked about it a lot. We've invested a huge amount of time and thought in it to date. I suppose I'm saying this from a personal perspective, it may not be my last meeting as chair. I'd like to see this one bottomed out before the baton is passed across to someone else, if everyone else is happy with that approach. Excellent, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to noted already around this review?
No, I think that was a really, really good discussion. I think recommendation 4, I think we'll get a good discussion point as well, because I think we just obviously to say as well, obviously we raised a recommendation in a way that you need to decide whether the terms of reference need to be updated to reflect your role, or because at the moment I wouldn't feel you've got enough information to fulfil the role that we'd expect in the risk management framework. But I think you've had a healthy discussion, obviously, and reached a good outcome for that as well to take forward. Perfect. So if it's okay, I will then go on to appendix B. So this obviously we've recorded, obviously we have got a couple of outstanding audits from previous years. So the cybersecurity maturity audit is currently ongoing. We've had a slight delay in terms of receiving sufficient information to be able to complete the review due to operational requirements internally. But as I said, the lead for that is working well with our ICT lead there, and obviously we do anticipate that being completed to you as a final for the next audit committee meeting. The commissioners and partnership audit, I said we have at the request, obviously Norfolk are leading on this, obviously because obviously that was a specific area they wanted covered as well. So we are doing ongoing visits to Leeway and to NIDAS, and then we've also got a visit scheduled with the victim support team in February. So what we're proposing, so this doesn't have a delay, because obviously we want to be able to finalise the report as soon as we can. We'll split the report into the 2 areas that we've looked at. So the ones that have been visited in October will be part of the first report, and then also be a separate report that's produced at the year end that summarise the visits and the outcomes when we visit victim support. And they specifically ask those visits to be done that way, because victim support, they've had a lot of work being done at the moment in terms of what's being done internally, and there's a new contract looking to be arranged there, or it's going out for procurement. So they specifically asked that we don't go and visit them at the moment. So that will be for that one. And then the change management audit, we have agreed the 10th of February is the start date for that. We have also got a pre-scoping meeting arranged for the 22nd of November so that we can scope. We've already got a scope, but agreed the outline scope, and then we'll meet again in January, because the change management audit has slipped a number of times, obviously due to operational requirements internally, but we just want to get that completed by year end. And the ACOs and Kurt have been very, very supportive in making sure that we do get that audit completed this year, because it keeps on being moved back and we don't want to move that back any further. And then on the 25-26 plan, things are progressing well. We have PIC visits are ongoing, and we've specifically been asked to visit. Could I say it's the public meeting the sites for visiting, or? Yeah. So specifically at the request of management, we are visiting the Bury site, because that's one area they think that they would like us to focus on, obviously. So That's been done, and then we are visiting also Marshall as well, but we've also got 2 sites for visiting in Norfolk as well. Those visits are not going to be surprised. We did suggest that to management. They're unannounced visits, but management felt it was more appropriate for us to go in to be able to. They didn't think that was necessary. And one area we are focusing on when we're out in the pits is looking at the data quality, the input of data at the initial time, because obviously data quality is an ongoing theme where we're seeing there have been some issues. So that's one area we are focusing on, along with a number of other areas as well. But we have been given specific dates when we can go in and do the sites around training requirements internally. So we are working with management to make sure that we do as less impact in terms of our visits to what's already going as a pressurised time for everyone as well. And obviously, as I mentioned, the communication strategy has been issued as a draft. The X meeting was yesterday, so that will be final very shortly. And then obviously we've got a number of other audits currently in progress. So the procurement and contract management, they are ongoing and they will be presented to you at next committee. Procurement always takes quite a while because there's a number of different people where we are doing some 740 procurement, and then the more devolved lower level procurement at different areas. There's a number of different people been involved in that as well. But yeah, things are progressing well from our side. We have got a lot of audits being undertaken at the front of the plan to avoid any delays going forward. But happy to take any comments on the progress against the 25-26 plan.
Yeah, so on the communication strategy, when do we expect to get a report back on that?
Yeah, so it's in draft. We had the exit meeting yesterday, so that obviously will be out as a final in the next couple of days. As soon as we get your management comments to finalise that.
Copy that.
Of course we can.
Look forward to receiving that. And could I just ask on the police investigation centres, is this presumably a joint order of all the sites in?
It is, and then what we'll do is, if let's say there's specific difference between Suffolk and Norfolk, we'll potentially have it will be a split report, and anticipate this will go into the private section because obviously it's likely to have sensitive information enclosed in that as well.
No, it is important because of course the way it's structured at the moment, it's under a joint department. So certainly look forward to that with interest.
I don't think it should be split, Claire. I think it's.
You think happy?
Yeah.
We'll put a job. If there were specific differences, Kenneth, we think, are you happy for it to go? It's fine.
Just on the police investigation centres again, are you also doing your own assessment of each of the centres to consider where you should look in your sample?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we obviously, to be honest, in Suffolk, we're doing 2 out of 3. So we want to do Martlesham, and then there was an option between the other 2, and also they specifically asked for Bury. So we were happy to accommodate that as well, based on the volume of the numbers that were going through. So it seemed reasonable as well. Martlesham was always going to be the second one, but they decided, and Bury, they think there was specific, we'd like to focus on their culture there as well. So we thought that would be worthwhile. We're happy to support that as well.
Only 2 in Suffolk. There's 4 in Norfolk, 2 in Suffolk. So it's always going to be Bury and Martlesham. It's always going to be Windsor because that's the biggest one in Norfolk. And I don't quite know which other one you've picked, probably Kings Lynn or Great Yarmouth. But yeah, there's no real science behind it. You go for the biggest. 6.
Thank you, that's quite helpful because I wasn't sure how many of them were talking about here.
Yeah, Suffolk's easy because you've only got 2, whereas Norfolk, that's where we make a decision based on obviously what they would like us to cover.
Yeah, second question. So we've got a good number of reports coming through this time. In total, you've got 9 due to come in February 26. So can I just sense check that both your teams are well resourced to do that? Also, we're well resourced within the police force as well to support that number of reports coming through.
Obviously, yes. It's kind of spread across, so it's not kind of concentrated on a particular area. So they should have sufficient resources to support it. Nobody's kind of sort of said no when we've shared the timetable and the plan with them. So we're expecting that to be okay. Now, something could come in left field in terms of a requirement that might cause the timetable to be changed. But so far, nothing from my side.
And we have tried to plan, so we've only in different areas at different time to reduce impact on management.
Could I just ask on your estate strategy audit, is that again for both?
It is for both Norfolk and Suffolk, so yeah, so that's, yeah, absolutely.
That's potentially quite interesting.
It is a very interesting piece of work we're doing at the moment, yeah.
Because it may be different, well, the whole situation's different. So how are we going to, will you be giving a subset for Suffolk and a subset for Norfolk, or how?
So we always anticipate everything being a joint report. If we had significant differences, obviously we discuss it with Colette and Kenny. If we felt that if there was a need to split it, we would, but we always anticipate being joint. And if there was a need.
Okay, state strategy, but for Tim and sure Sarah has got a similar estate strategy
Yeah.
in Norfolk. So if you're kind of looking at the strategic perspective, it's split, but then you kind of sort of look at the tactical.
Yeah.
The department is joint in places.
Trying to think.
It differs slightly from the picks, but
Yeah,
we can work that one through.
thanks.
So if I go on to obviously the last part of the audit committee updates, obviously appendix C covers the recommendations. So obviously we have got at the top of identified recommendations that have been implemented since the last audit committee meeting. We've also obviously at the bottom, I just wanted to flag, obviously there are currently 3 overdue recommendations. The top 2, obviously one's a connection to potential for staff, and the other one obviously relates to the workforce planning. We have seen the plans and we have seen the strategies for both of these, and we were satisfied that they do cover the key areas. What we haven't seen is it formally signed off, and there has been some sort of staff issues in terms of the HR team to be able to take these recommendations forward. So they have proposed a revised due date of the 31st of December, and obviously we can understand their rationale, but I will pause there and take any questions about those 2 overdue recommendations specific for those ones. And obviously we have also got the data quality one, but obviously since the paper's done, I know Kenneth has obviously had an update, so we should be in a position to obviously review the compensatory controls in place there to potentially take this one and close this one, so that it's closed down. As obviously done all that we can to address that risk there for that recommendation. And I'll just pause there.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to ask on the overdue action on workforce planning. Because a revised date has been requested, I just wondered what that date was.
Yeah, they're looking for the 31st of December, as opposed to for the one for above. So that's what they wanted to work towards, because I think that's when the right people will be in place to take this forward and own those recommendations.
The data quality one, please. This has been outstanding for some time. How does this link in with the current data quality audit that's been done?
And that's what we're doing as well, is because we're doing that audit at the moment, so we're trying to look at the compensatory controls in that to be able to close this one down as well. So it just felt at the moment, obviously we're reviewing that as part of the scope of the work we're doing now to see if we can see any mitigating controls, because the Genie ClearCore project isn't really moving any further forward. There's not the funds to do that, so that's part of our remit of this audit to see if we can close that down based on obviously what is in place currently.
Just as a follow-up to that, how does that then also link in with the performance management one, which is a substantial assurance, which is great. But that is presumably how we're then reporting the data, and data quality is at the actual input of data in the first place.
Yeah, obviously we did sort of try to look at the links best we can, and that's why we're doing the PIC audit specific, looking at obviously at data quality impact, but in terms of what we can see from the performance, there's a lot of data cleansing undertaken to identify things that potentially will skew the data as well. So we're satisfied that it's been done internally. Obviously, this is more specifically what we're doing to try and reduce the data errors and that Genie ClearCore's ability to potentially look at a legacy system. So that's where there's a slight difference there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything further for Claire?
Just coming on the information management one, because I think we probably can close down that action. Is a data management exportation project that we're looking at. It's going to be a bit more comprehensive than just Genie ClearCore. Genie ClearCore's working, it's fine, no issues with it. But as part of that, we might say, well, actually, do we need something slightly different moving forward, or do we kind of sort of link in with what we've got? So data management exploitation is going to look at some data cleansing, going to look at match and merge. It's going to look at other areas around where we can delete data retention policies, all that sort of stuff. So there's quite a big piece of work there that now we've got a new head of information which is going to drive that forward. We'll just tuck in Genie ClearCore as part of that. I don't think we've think GDPR at the moment is a risk for us. It's not necessarily commercial shelf software, but it's working. Quite content with it. If there are any sort of risks with it, we're having to look at it.
Anything further on the item? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6 as was English. That.
Well, I think a great deal to say. I'm better declare an interest, I suppose, on candidates for the mayoral authority, but from the policing perspective, I think there is a lot of work to be done. But one of the concerns I have is we've had it confirmed by the Home Office that the responsibility for oversight, if you like, PCC role, will transfer to the new mayor on the 1st of April 27. Also includes fire and rescue. But we've got to look at, I suppose, novating all various contracts, agreements, etc. So there is a lot to do there to make sure there is a smooth transition, because the work has to carry on regardless. My personal view is I think it's a very, very tight time scale. I think there is a concern about that, actually. And the reason I mentioned fire and rescue is because, as I'm sure all the committee members know, we have a very integrated state strategy and other work that we do with fire and rescue. We've got 13 shared premises. So how does the responsibility, governance, etc., move over into the new regime? The only other thing I really want to mention here that, having spoken to the Home Office, we still need to have the clarification: will the budget for policing for each force area be moved over block? I presume it will, but we do need some confirmation on how that will work. And I think the concern would be that for the new mayoralty, you will have the mayor will effectively still have to decide on 2 separate budgets, 2 separate levels of council tax, 2 levels of debt, which are very different in Norfolk and Suffolk. So there is a huge degree of complexity potentially. I'm not entirely sure the Home Office, Civil Service and ministers have thought this through perhaps as well as they could have done. That's just a personal view. And it hasn't helped that we've now got new ministers and a new Home Secretary. And I do want to just talk about the local government review, because that does have a direct influence on the mayoral authority, combined mayoral county mayor authority. And the legislation still has to get through Parliament for that. And I think we were told, well, they hope to have it done in the spring. So I said, well, that's a very long piece of string. Said to the civil servants, yes, that's a civil service term, string. Goodness knows. And that is a concern, because there's a huge amount there. If you look at all the relationships we've got, the partnership we've got in policing here, which does involve a lot of other responsible authorities, as well as other charities and so on. And I do have a concern about how this will all work if the legislation doesn't get passed through both houses of Parliament. And people need to be aware of that. So the House of Lords, it's got a big influence. If they think it's going to go through the spring, well, elections are going to be at the beginning of May. And the first meteorological date of spring is March 1st. For the seasons, it's the 21st of March. Well, you're right then into an election period. Well, it's to be optimistic, I suppose. So I don't know, but that's all I could say. But I mean, I know, Darren, you're doing quite a lot of work with Norfolk NPC. Constabulary are doing a lot of work on how to move it over in a smooth way, so work can continue.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'd add to what Tim has already said is Suffolk County Council to debate. So both the Suffolk County Council and the County Council have to endorse the proposal for it to then go forward. So Suffolk did that on the 3rd of October. Not I think Norfolk did it yesterday, I believe. Yeah. So those are two, stop go sort of gateways which are both being passed. So we're pending the legislation. We are progressing. There is quite a lot of work, as Tim referenced, just working out the options of how the model goes over. And I think once a mayor is in place, there'll be some key decisions in terms of what they want to see post 2027. And I think that will probably be a point where the audit committee may want to look in more detail about some of those options and the implications, you know, across the board. For a bit of time till we get there, but lots of planning.
Yes. I just think it'd be a very good idea if the audit committee did look at it, if you don't mind me saying so, because there is a huge degree of complexity, and I think it's so important. As I said twice already, the work continues and doesn't get. It could be a huge distraction, which is not what anybody wants. That's what worries me about it. I don't know, Kenneth, whether you've got any other views as well, but
The committee wants to look at it. I think you can look at the OPCC preparedness and constabulary preparedness. I'm not sure you can necessarily got a remit to go outside of that.
Yeah, that's
More than happy.
yeah. I suppose my point there was more once there's some decisions, once the mayor's in place and there's been some decisions, we'll be able to give you fuller briefings in terms of what the plan is and how exactly those systems are designed to work going forward. At the moment, it's just possibility.
Yeah. The risk is that constabulary falls over because of all the distractions, same the OPCC, which are the focus for you.
How's the devolution work being funded at the moment? Is that an existing budget or is there a separate allocation?
there is a separate allocation there for the county council work. We are not getting anything, which I think is, well, I don't think it's really fair actually, because my understanding is the county council uses up and all the extra work that's been, if you like, imposed on us by the government. We're not getting any say. I mean, representation has been made, but that's fine. That's the least you can do. But that's through the Association of Police and Crime Commissions. But I'm not at all hopeful we'll get anything from the government because at the moment there are only 3 other areas. So it's Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Sussex, Essex, and ourselves. And we are, to some extent, I suppose, a little bit of an experiment. We've got the only area we've got 2 separate force areas being put into one, which is another potential difficulty, let's say. But no, we've got no indication of getting any funding from the Home Office. And I have to say, I think only until recently, the engagement from MHCOG, Housing Community Government, has been a bit substandard in relations with the Home Office. I think it's improving, but actually I think we were very much on the outs and it had been done unto without the opportunity to have really good robust dialogue, but also pointing out the difficulties there are. That has improved, but it should have been like that in the first place, in my view.
So until we get till we get closer to the process, we agree we'll keep this on the agenda as a standing item. Darren, your comment about audit review and audit engagement prompts a slightly obvious question. Presumably, Norfolk are going through exactly the same process, having exactly the same conversations or very similar conversations. Is there any advantage in the 2 committees at a future point in time having a combined discussion, perhaps face to face rather than via Zoom?
So can I think about that? Is that okay? Because we are doing it. The 2 offices and the 2 constabularies are working very closely together, as you would expect, within the programme. The programme itself, which is being largely led by the 2 county councils, but includes all of the quite a wide array of different work streams, of which the PCC is one element of that, is very much focused on ensuring that things are safe and legal for day 1 in 2026. And the second phase of that is preparing options for a mayor when they come in terms of how they may want to enact the powers that come in, both grow those that they've got and prepare for the actions that come in 2027. So while we should get greater clarity, there's no guarantee the mayor will make your decisions around that on day 1. So the timing issue is relatively hard to predict at the moment. Why don't I take it away and I'll have a chat to Mark, my equivalent in Norfolk, and we'll just come up with a suggestion. But I think the briefings, a regular briefing like this, we can provide a bit more information each time as we get more and it becomes a bit clearer to us.
Just wondering whether or not we could have a session on this in the workshop. to go through the various risks that there are with this. At the moment, they're so broad, as you've already said, almost anything could happen.
Yes.
Actually go through, well, what are the potential risks here, so that as decisions start to be made, we can then see more clearly how plans are actually going to help mitigate those.
Workshops in February.
Yeah.
I mean, there are two or three other things I've just thought of, but I may have mentioned this before, but one of the concerns I think we would all share is if you end up with more than one unitary, and I'm not saying we should definitely go for a single unitary. I understand the arguments on both sides, but one of the issues I think we've got to look at very carefully. I don't think it would help to have fragmentation of areas of work such as youth justice, trading standards, children in care, looked after children. These sorts of things need to be handled carefully, because going forward it needs to be an improvement, not a retrograde step. And I think there's a worry if you end up, for example, I think the same as in Norfolk actually, there are proposed to have 3 unitaries. Well, what happens to those services that are with one? There could be a way through, but you need to make sure it's about improvement and not just status quo. Otherwise, there's no point doing it. But those 3 functions where the constabulary is heavily involved, same things like MAPA, the MASH, etc. How is all this going to work? Safeguarding as a whole, has that been thought through properly by government? And I suggest the answer is no, from what I've heard. But I hope I'm wrong. But those are areas that I think are crucial, because if that goes wrong, well, we all know what will happen. The finger will be pointed at various people. So we need to have a robust set of plans of how that's going to be managed. And there's a risk, and I think that's on our risk, which is certainly on ours, because it is a big risk. No two ways about it. Just cheer everybody up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can take that up to have a conversation with brothers in Norfolk, but also just that idea around having an input into the workshop in February. I'd obviously like to speak to the constabulary about, how we do that and stuff, and then come back to you. That's what I've discussed with him.
It brings to your point, and also picking up, Kenneth said earlier, whilst the focus is on the risks from day one of the changed arrangements, one of the other key risks is this works and these various work streams, this huge piece of work, interferes with the day-to-day operation until we get to day one. I think the committee is quite right to ask for some assurance, maybe in the closed private session workshop, how the risks to the as-is model are being managed as we move forwards. So if we could just add that to the agenda for the workshop, I think that would be helpful.
And so can I just speak on exactly that point? It's that current program management and also the risk of substantial a lot of work that is undertaken then to explore, and it's really difficult to manage that, because you may think it's a live option to take forward, and then it becomes a board. But when is the call made of we need to stop going down this track because we're spending too much resource? And I think that's a real challenge, not just for the police, but for any organisation that's currently in this. And because Suffolk is in that delightful position of being both in the DPP and LGR at the same time, the risk of people going off on a track that then problems is very. That's really, and I should maybe know the answer to this, but will there be any learning from Surrey? Just because they're.
So is a year behind us.
I thought Surrey was a year ahead.
No, year behind.
So there are a number of areas around the country that have gone through a similar process to
Yeah.
us, and through the APCC, we collectively nationally commissioned a piece of work research done by Linkwise, where they talked to Tim, talked to myself, talked to a variety of areas that have gone through it, looked at how those have how they've progressed, the weaknesses and strengths of those, and produced a report that's actually quite useful as a sort of, I say summary, quite a long report, but it's sort of, it does collate the learnings and the questions and the, some of the things that need to be considered from a sort of PCC and program perspective. So that piece of work that was commissioned nationally, and also within the program in Suffolk and Norfolk, there has been a fair amount of linking in with different areas to understand how their teams have dealt with it well, what the offshots were. I had a conversation with the now director of policing and fire in North Yorkshire 2 weeks ago, and we had a good conversation about it. So those connections and learnings are definitely there. The context is always slightly different, as Tim said. Suffolk and Norfolk are unique in the sense that we're actually, and in some ways, that's well, it's all interesting, but that's an added complexity.
I mean, North York's probably best example to use because it's a big rural area.
Yeah.
They already have fire put in there anyway, didn't
They
they?
were always pleased, yeah, they were already a police fire and crime commissioner.
That's slightly different. But yeah, the other areas have been delayed for years, so that includes Surrey, Cheshire, Cumbria. So they're coming in the following year.
In terms of bringing the police in, or in terms of.
Which will then
Then-
increase, as long as the boundaries are consistent. So we've ended up with a bit of a further muddle, because if you look at Lincolnshire, they've rented plan. She has not taken on policing because part of Lincolnshire includes Humberside Police. And I think in Cheshire, I'm right in saying they're looking at tinkering with the boundaries there to get that to be consistent. So any of the patchwork quick, which I personally think is a bit ridiculous, because there'd be a lack of consistency all over the country. But I mean, it might be an idea if we just give you a monthly update as and when we hear anything, I think. Because it's fast moving, because things do change and there is this complication. I think it's quite a worry. Will it all go ahead as planned because of getting the legislation? No room for losing time, getting through both houses of Parliament. So that is definitely a risk. Will it be postponed for a year? I don't know. I've got no evidence of that, but at the moment we're planning those dates. Whereas in North Yorkshire, you see that there's plenty of time to plan for it, a couple of years ahead. So this is very much pressed. Apart from that, everything's fine.
Yeah, I mean, just reflecting on all that, I think it's really challenging for all to tackle something that's essentially an emerging event, and one of this complexity is really difficult for audit committee, because usually, you know, we're taking a reflective view on this work that's been done. Obviously, the auditors are going to be much help, due respect, in this, because you can't audit a work in progress, and that's, you know, if you try, that's a disaster and waste of money. So I think the February discussion should be really useful. It will require, obviously, management of the audit committee to work quite closely together in order to, one, establish what our role is in this process, and two, to ensure that, one, we're getting the information we need to address whatever objectives we set ourselves. Also, we don't add to the management burden and make things worse, and then create another distraction with something that would be dealt with some breaking events along the way. And the other thing I was going to ask, which Tim just volunteered, was a regular update between now and February, in terms of as we reach, and if that needs to be, you know, circulated under confidentiality, that would be fine, just so that kind of prepare us for next time. We'll pick up things in public domain naturally, but your view, I think, would be.
No, well, if you do that in a bullet point format rather than writing a great big narrative, we don't want to. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Anything further? Realising my rush to get to devolution and Colette, I've signed to be on Treasury Management. I know the deal from now late, for reasons outside of our control. I think though, as we've got the paper, we've had a couple of days to look at it. It would be helpful to pick it up at this meeting rather than as long as February.
Yeah.
If there's anything substantive coming out, then we can take it forward. If not, at least we're considering it at the right time.
Absolutely.
So, thanks for getting what you have done. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate allowing me to speak to this meeting. As you said, it's a mid-year training management report, mid-year, 30th of September, and we obviously had to go through our month-end processes as well as getting treasury management reporting templates from our Treasury advisors, and hence the latest report, but more timely now than in February. So, thank you for letting me present it.
And we are under the current TMRs, just noting, not reviewing.
But obviously happy to take any comments and questions as appropriate. The report kind of covers the treasury management activities of the PCC for the period from the 1st of April 2025 to 30th of September 25. It includes an economic update from our treasury advisors, which kind of sets the economic setting in which the treasury activity occurred and how it impacts then interest rate forecasts, which are included our economic advisors' interest rate forecast for both the bank rate and PWRB loan rate. From kind of our financial perspective, the key headlines are that borrowing hasn't exceeded our operational boundaries or authorised external debt limits that we set in the treasury management strategy in January. And our external borrowing remains with one external loan held with PWRB, which is being paid 10 years' time. I think it still sets at 4.51%, so it's lower than the rates that kind of a forecast from our treasury advisors currently. From an investment performance perspective, the paper details how much treasury we've accrued to date, and our counterparty maintenance has been in line with our treasury management strategy statement. So in terms of kind of keeping our counterparty maintenance updated, there's been no downgrades for who we invest with currently in the period of 6 months that this report covers. And obviously we still invest security as a top priority, and therefore it's the highest rates for the institutions that we do invest with. I think that's kind of the headlines that I wanted to cover off, and obviously the action that's picked up earlier on in the meeting in terms of the consideration of the limits of our counterparty investments is ongoing. The current limits for this report were per our current treasury management strategy and set at £10 million per institution. I'd like to take any questions.
Thank you for that. We are on to business. We've got one paper from Rob Jones that I think in Rachel's absence you've taken to.
Chair, I just wanted to the actions been raised recently. Rob Jones of DCC as the Chief Officer, portfolio lead for the Directorate, has produced a one-pager that you have in front of you. The top half of that is, I think, a bit of background on what the Directorate is up to, and then the second half of the page really giving a kind of a very brief update in terms of where we are against the internal audit recommendations. I think going back to the secret, you will have noticed that I think about sort of 7 of their recommendations have been implemented since the last audit committee, with the 2 that Claire raised outstanding in terms of retention strategy, strategic workforce plan, and their work in progress. They're in draft and just going through a final sign off internally. So that's where we are. Happy to take any questions on the briefing that you have in front of you.
I just ask, what's this saying? Safe speed.
It says
I did wonder it was that, and I take it that's speak up and then retain your job.
well, it's people who are thinking of leaving the constabulary and we have say and stay, which is what can we do to persuade you to stay? And so we prefer people to say, well, actually, there's some issues here. It might be in terms of requirement for flexible working and things like that, just to sort of meet the requirements of what might be happening in their domestic lives. So we can do that. It's been successful in terms of retention, something that Tim picks up with APP.
Taking very keen interest in that.
Yeah.
Further questions for Kenneth? I've not got any other AOB for this meeting. So the meeting closes at 10:40. Possibly the shortest meeting ever. We need to get back to the records. Next meeting is 6th of February 2026, which sounds a very, very long way away.